Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Confederate mining vessel Aurora and watched the stars drift past the view screen. For 200 years, the galaxy had known peace under the rule of the Zephyrian Empire. War was something from old history books, a savage practice that civilized species had left behind long ago. Jake had been mining asteroids and forgotten sectors for 15 years, and the most dangerous thing he usually faced was a broken drill or a faulty oxygen recycler. The void sector was different, though. This part of space was marked as forbidden, territory on every Confederate map. The official report said it was too dangerous for travel, filled with radiation storms and unstable gravitational fields. Most captains avoided it completely, but Jake had always been curious about empty spaces on the map. His crew thought he was crazy for taking mining contracts in the Outer Rim, but the pay was good and Jake liked the quiet. "Captain, I'm reading. Something strange on the long-range sensors," called out his navigator, Pete Williams. Pete was young, maybe 25, fresh out of the Confederate Space Academy. He still got excited about every unusual reading, but this time his voice carried a different kind of tension. Jake walked over to Pete's station and looked at the display. There was definitely something out there, drifting in the darkness between two dead star systems. The shape was all wrong, though. Confederate ships were smooth and curved, built for efficiency and comfort. This thing looked angular and brutal, like someone had built it for fighting instead of flying. "Run a database check," Jake ordered. "See if you can match that design to anything in Confederate records." Pete's fingers danced across his console for several minutes. His frown grew deeper with each search. "Nothing, Captain. The computer doesn't recognize this ship at all. It's not in any of our records, not even the historical archives." Jake stared at the strange vessel on the screen. In 2 centuries of galactic peace, every ship design had been cataloged and registered. The Confederacy kept detailed records of every species and their technology. Finding an unknown ship was like finding a new color, or discovering that math didn't work the way everyone thought it did. "Take us closer," Jake decided, "but keep our shields up and weapons ready." The weapons comment made Pete nervous. Confederate ships had defensive systems and mining lasers, but nothing designed to hurt another living being. The very idea of ship-to-ship combat was considered barbaric. Still, Jake had a bad feeling about this mysterious vessel. And 15 years of mining dangerous sectors had taught him to trust his instincts. As the Aurora moved closer, more details became visible. The unknown ship was huge, easily twice the size of Jake's mining vessel. Its hull was dark gray metal covered in scorch marks and what looked like battle damage. Pieces of debris floated around it like a funeral shroud. Whatever had happened to this ship, it had been violent. "I'm detecting a very faint power signature," reported Lisa Cooper from the engineering station. Lisa was Jake's best technician, a woman who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. "Something inside is still running, but barely. Life support maybe, or emergency systems." Jake made his decision. "Prep the boarding shuttle. I want to take a look inside that thing." "Sir, regulations require us to contact Confederate Command before boarding unknown vessels," Pete reminded him nervously. "Confederate Command is 6 weeks away by faster-than-light communication," Jake replied. "By the time they send a response, whatever's keeping that ship alive will be dead. We're going aboard." The boarding party consisted of Jake, Lisa, and 2 security officers named Ron Davis and Carl Johnson. Confederate security officers were more like policemen than soldiers, trained to handle disputes and accidents rather than combat. They carried stun weapons and emergency medical supplies, not the kind of gear you'd need for a real fight. The airlock of the unknown ship was different from anything Jake had seen before. Instead of the smooth, automated doors used throughout the Confederacy, this was a heavy manual system that required physical strength to operate. The walls inside were thick metal instead of the lightweight composites that modern ships used. Everything about the design suggested that whoever built this ship expected it to take damage. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as the boarding. Party moved through corridors that were too narrow and too low for comfort. The walls were lined with what looked like weapon mounts and armor plating. This wasn't a civilian vessel or even a military ship by Confederate standards. This was something built for war. "Captain, I'm reading life signs," Lisa whispered, checking her scanner. "Very faint, but definitely organic. Coming from that direction." They followed her directions deeper into the ship, past rooms filled with equipment they didn't recognize, and machinery that looked like it was designed to cause harm rather than prevent it. Finally, they found what they were looking for in what appeared to be a makeshift prison cell. The figure lying on the metal floor looked human, but that was impossible. Humans were not part of the Confederacy, and no human world appeared in any galactic database, yet there was no mistaking the species. The prisoner wore strange military clothing covered in patches and symbols that meant nothing to Jake. Most disturbing of all, the human was a woman, and she was still alive. Sam Rodriguez opened her eyes and looked up at the 4 aliens standing over her. After 30 years in stasis, her body felt like it was made of broken glass, but her mind was clear. These weren't devourers, which meant she might actually have a chance to warn someone about what was coming, if anyone would listen, to a human prisoner found floating in the void. Agent Vera Collins had seen many strange things during her 20 years with Confederate intelligence, but nothing had prepared her for the human prisoner now sitting across from her in the interrogation room. The woman called herself Lieutenant. Sam Rodriguez, and everything about her was wrong according to 2 centuries of galactic peace. Her muscle density was too high, her reflexes too fast, and her eyes held a hardness that Vera had only read about in historical accounts of pre-civilization warfare. "Tell me about Earth," Vera said, keeping her voice calm and professional. The recording devices were running, and this conversation would be studied by Confederate xenobiologists and historians for years to come. Sam looked around the sterile white room with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs. Everything was designed to be non-threatening and peaceful, which only made her more nervous. She had been interrogated before, but never in a place that looked more like a medical facility than a prison. "Earth is gone," Sam said simply. "Has been for 40 years now. The Devourers came, and we fought them as long as we could, but there were too many of them." Vera made notes on her datapad. The prisoner spoke with absolute conviction, showing none of the signs of deception that Confederate training had taught her to recognize. Either Sam Rodriguez was the most skilled liar in galactic history, or she genuinely believed everything she was saying. "Describe these Devourers," Vera requested. "What did they look like? How did they attack?" Sam closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, Vera saw something that made her uncomfortable. It was pain, but not the kind that came from physical injury. This was the look of someone who had watched everything they cared about die. "They don't look like anything," Sam explained. "The Devourers aren't a species. They're a collective consciousness that consumes other civilizations. They take your ships, your technology, your people, and turn them all into extensions of themselves. By the time you see them coming, they're already using your own weapons against you." Vera had read every first contact report in Confederate history. She had studied the peaceful integration of dozens of species into the galactic community. Never once had there been mention of anything like what Sam described. "According to our records, no such entity exists," Vera stated. "Our deep space sensors monitor every system within 50,000 light years. If this threat was real, we would have detected it." Sam laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Your sensors detect what you expect to find. The Devourers learned long ago how to hide inside normal space traffic. They probably already have agents in your Confederacy, studying your defenses and reporting back to the main force." The interrogation continued for hours. Sam described a war that had lasted 30 years, fought between humanity and an enemy, that could not be reasoned with or defeated through traditional means. She spoke of battles in space and on planets, of entire star systems consumed to fuel the Devourer advance. Most disturbing of all, she claimed that Earth had sent out reconnaissance missions to warn other galaxies about the coming threat. "My ship was part of Deep Range Reconnaissance Group 7, Sam explained. "We were supposed to make contact with advanced civilizations and share intelligence about Devourer tactics. Instead, we ran into a scouting force and barely escaped with our lives." Vera cross-referenced Sam's story with Confederate records. There had indeed been some unusual incidents in recent years. The Kepler mining colonies had gone silent 3 years ago, their distress signal cutting off mid-transmission. The Vega system had reported massive energy drains before all communication ceased. Sector 7 had simply vanished from the navigation charts. "These incidents you mention," Vera said carefully, "our investigation teams concluded they were natural disasters or equipment failures." "Your investigation teams found exactly what the Devourers wanted them to find," Sam replied. "That's how they work. They make their attacks look like accidents until it's too late to respond." High Arbiter Nexus Prime reviewed the interrogation reports with growing concern. The Zephyrian leader had spent 50 years maintaining galactic peace through careful diplomacy and the elimination of all military technology. War was a concept from the Dark Ages, and the idea that an entire species might be naturally violent was deeply disturbing to him. "This human claims that her people were warriors by choice," he said to the Council of Species Representatives. "She describes weapons designed specifically to kill rather than disable, military tactics that prioritize victory over preservation of life, and a culture that glorifies combat. Such a species would be incompatible with Confederate peace." Dr. Ben Taylor had been studying Sam's physical characteristics since her arrival. The xenoarchaeologist was fascinated by the evolutionary adaptations that suggested a species shaped by constant conflict. Her bone density was 30% higher than baseline. Her cardiovascular system was designed for sustained physical stress, and her brain showed unusual development in areas associated with tactical thinking. "The prisoner demonstrates reflexes that exceed our measurement capabilities," Ben reported to the council. "When we tested her with standard cognitive exercises, she consistently anticipated multiple outcomes and prepared responses for scenarios that our subjects never consider. It's as if her species evolved specifically for warfare." Meanwhile, Sam was becoming increasingly frustrated with her captors. Every attempt to warn them about the Devourer threat was met with polite skepticism, or outright dismissal. These people had lived in peace for so long that they couldn't recognize the signs of an approaching war. "You have to understand," she told Vera during their 5th interrogation session, "the Devourers aren't like anything you've faced before. They don't want territory or resources or political control. They want to consume everything that makes you who you are and add it to their collective consciousness." "Assuming your story is true," Vera replied, "what would you have us do? The Confederacy has no military forces, no weapons of war, no experience with the kind of conflict you describe." "Then you're going to die," Sam said bluntly. "All of you, unless someone learns how to fight back before they arrive." That night, Vera sat in her quarters reviewing the interview recordings. Everything in her training said that Sam Rodriguez was either delusional or lying, but the physical evidence was harder to dismiss. The ship she had been found in was built for combat, its design principles completely alien to Confederate engineering. The weapons mounts and armor plating suggested a civilization that expected to fight for survival. More troubling were the energy readings that Dr. Taylor had detected around the prisoner. Sam seemed to generate some kind of field that interfered with Confederate technology. Scanning equipment malfunctioned in her presence, and the pacification devices used to calm agitated suspects had no effect on her at all. As Vera prepared for sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Sam's warnings might sound impossible, but what if they were true? What if there really was something out there in the darkness between galaxies? Something that had already destroyed one civilization and was now looking for its next target? The emergency beacon from Patrol Group Delta reached the Aurora 3 days after Sam Rodriguez had been transferred to the Confederate detention facility. Captain Jake Morrison listened to the automated distress signal with growing unease. Patrol. Ships didn't just disappear in Confederate space, especially not entire squadrons with experienced crews and the latest navigation equipment. Set course for their last known position, Jake ordered his crew. Maximum speed. When the Aurora arrived at the coordinates, what they found defied explanation. 3 Confederate patrol ships floated dead in space, their hulls intact but completely powerless. No debris field, no signs of explosion or collision, just 3 vessels drifting like ghost ships in the endless night. Pete Williams ran every scan his sensors could manage. "I'm not reading any life signs, Captain. No power signatures, no active systems. It's like something just drained all the energy right out of them." Jake had seen ship failures before, but nothing like this. Confederate vessels had multiple backup systems and emergency power cells that could keep life support running for months. For all 3 ships to lose power simultaneously suggested something far beyond normal mechanical failure. "Prep the shuttle," Jake decided. "I want to board the lead vessel and see what happened." The patrol ship Harmony was a standard Confederate design, built for long-range reconnaissance and peaceful contact with unknown species. As Jake and his team moved through its corridors, they found the crew stations empty but undisturbed. No signs of struggle, no indication of panic or emergency evacuation. The crew had simply vanished. Lisa Cooper studied the ship's main computer core with her engineering expertise. "This is impossible, Captain. The quantum batteries have been completely drained, but there's no record of where the energy went. It's like something just absorbed it all without leaving any trace." The other 2 ships showed identical conditions, empty hulls with missing crews and technology that had been mysteriously rendered inert. Jake had seen enough strange things in his mining career to recognize when something was seriously wrong, and this felt like the beginning of a much larger problem. Back on the Aurora, Jake made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. He requested permission to interview the human prisoner about the missing patrol ships. Confederate regulations normally prohibited civilian contact with intelligence assets, but Jake had discovered the prisoner and felt responsible for whatever was happening. Agent Vera Collins arrived at the detention facility looking haggard and tired. She had spent 3 days reviewing Sam Rodriguez's interrogation files and was beginning to suspect that the human's warnings might not be as crazy as they first appeared. "The prisoner claims to have information about the missing patrol ships," Jake explained when Vera met him in the facility's conference room. "She says this is connected to something called devourers." Sam was brought to the conference room in standard Confederate restraints, which looked more like medical devices than actual restraining equipment. She studied Jake's face carefully and seemed to recognize something in his expression that told her he was finally ready to listen. "You found them, didn't you?" Sam said without waiting for questions. "Empty ships drained of all power, crews missing without any signs of struggle." Jake nodded slowly. "How did you know?" "Because that's how it starts," Sam replied. "The Devourers send scout units ahead of the main force. They look for isolated targets to test local defenses and gather intelligence. Those patrol ships weren't destroyed, they were harvested." Vera activated her recording equipment. "Explain what you mean by harvested." Sam took a deep breath and began describing something that would have sounded like science fiction to her listeners if they hadn't just seen the evidence with their own eyes. The Devourers don't just kill their enemies, they absorb them. Every ship they capture, every technology they encounter, every person they take becomes part of their collective consciousness. Those missing crews are probably still alive somewhere, but they're not human anymore. "That's impossible," Vera protested. "Our medical scanners would have detected any kind of biological conversion process." "Your scanners detect what they're programmed to look for," Sam explained patiently. "The Devourers have been perfecting this technique for thousands of years." They know how to work around the limitations of conventional technology. Jake was beginning to understand why the strange ship had seemed so wrong when he first found it. That vessel you were imprisoned in, it wasn't built by the Devourers, was it? No, that was a human deep reconnaissance ship called the Defiant, Sam confirmed. My team captured it from the Devourers after they had already begun converting it. We were trying to study their technology when they tracked us down and destroyed my crew. Dr. Ben Taylor arrived at the detention facility with a portable laboratory full of exotic scanning equipment. His xenoarchaeology background had given him access to sensor technology that could detect energy patterns invisible to normal Confederate instruments. I've been studying the energy signatures from the missing patrol ships, Ben reported. There are trace quantum fluctuations that match the readings we detected around the prisoner's vessel. Whatever happened to those ships, it's connected to this human and her story. Sam looked around the room at the 4 Confederates who were finally starting to believe her warnings. How long do you think it's been since the first Devourer scouts entered your galaxy? Vera consulted her datapad. Based on the pattern of incidents you described, possibly 3 years. Then you have maybe 6 months before the main force arrives, Sam said grimly. The scouts will have gathered enough intelligence by now to plan a full invasion. They know your technology, your defenses, your population centers, and most importantly, they know you have no idea how to fight back. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? We don't know how to fight back. Look around you. Sam gestured at the peaceful detention facility with its comfortable furniture and non-violent restraint systems. Your entire civilization is built on the assumption that conflicts can be resolved through negotiation and compromise. You have no weapons designed to kill, no military tactics, no warriors trained for combat. The Devourers have consumed dozens of civilizations exactly like yours. Dr. Taylor was studying his sensor readings with growing alarm. The quantum signature around the prisoner is increasing. It's as if her presence is somehow activating latent energy patterns in local space. That's because I'm human, Sam explained. We're naturally resistant to Devourer conversion technology, which is why they kept me alive for study instead of absorbing me immediately. My species evolved specifically to fight them. Vera was beginning to grasp the implications of what Sam was telling them. You're saying that humans are naturally immune to this conversion process? Not immune, just resistant, Sam corrected. The Devourers can still kill us or capture us, but they can't easily add us to their collective consciousness. That's why Earth lasted 30 years against them when most civilizations fall within months. The room fell silent as the 4 Confederates contemplated a future where everything they had built over 2 centuries of peace might be destroyed by an enemy they didn't understand and couldn't fight. Jake was the first to break the silence. What do we need to do? Sam looked at each of them carefully, measuring their resolve. First, you need to stop thinking like diplomats and start thinking like soldiers. Then you need to learn everything you can about warfare before the main force arrives. Most importantly, you need to find other humans. Other humans? Vera asked. I thought you said Earth was destroyed. Earth is gone, but my reconnaissance group wasn't the only one, Sam replied. We sent deep space missions to dozens of galaxies. If even a few of them survived, there might be human military assets already in place throughout Confederate space, waiting for activation. The idea that humans had been secretly present in their galaxy for years should have been disturbing, but Jake found it oddly comforting. If there was going to be a war, having experienced warriors on their side seemed like the only chance they had for survival. The escape from the Confederate detention facility happened at 3 in the morning, when most of the security staff were asleep and the automated systems were running on minimal power. Captain Jake Morrison had spent 2 weeks planning the operation, with Lisa Cooper and Dr. Ben Taylor, while Agent Vera Collins provided inside information about facility layouts and guard schedules. Sam Rodriguez walked out of her cell when the magnetic locks mysteriously failed, following a route that Jake had memorized from stolen blueprints. The human moved with a silence and efficiency that made the others nervous, reminding them that she came from a species bred for warfare rather than peace. "This is treason," Vera whispered as they made their way through the facility corridors. "If Confederate Command catches us, we'll spend the rest of our lives in prison. If Confederate Command doesn't listen to us, there won't be a rest of our lives," Jake replied grimly. "The Devourer scouts are getting bolder. 2 more patrol groups went missing this week. The stolen shuttle Aurora carried them away from the detention facility and toward the Outer Rim territories where Jake had cached supplies and equipment during his mining operations. Sam had insisted that any resistance movement would need to operate from hidden bases, far from the Confederate core worlds where surveillance was constant and military thinking was considered criminal. Commander Alex Stone reviewed the escape reports with growing anger. The human prisoner represented a threat to everything the Confederacy had achieved over 2 centuries of peace. Her talk of warfare and violence was already spreading through the intelligence community, causing some agents to question the fundamental principles of their civilization. "Issue arrest warrants for Morrison and his crew," Alex ordered his security teams. "They're to be considered armed and dangerous, influenced by the prisoner's violent ideology. Use whatever force is necessary to bring them back." The irony of using force to capture people accused of promoting violence was lost on Alex. He had spent his entire career maintaining order through the threat of imprisonment and exile. The idea that actual warfare might be necessary for survival was so foreign to his thinking that he dismissed it as madness. Meanwhile, Sam was teaching her new allies the basics of military strategy in a hidden asteroid base that Jake had been using for equipment storage. The concepts were alien to people who had grown up believing that all conflicts could be resolved through negotiation and compromise. "The Devourers don't want anything from you," Sam explained to the group of 12 Confederate citizens who had joined their resistance movement. "They're not interested in your resources, your territory, or your surrender. They want to consume your entire civilization and add it to their collective consciousness." Lisa Cooper raised her hand like a student in a classroom. "But surely there must be some way to communicate with them. Some common ground we can find?" Sam's expression grew grim. "The only communication the Devourers understand is violence. They respect strength and despise weakness. Every attempt at peaceful contact just gives them more information to use against you." Dr. Ben Taylor had been studying Sam's combat training methods with scientific fascination. The humans' approach to warfare was based on principles that seemed to contradict everything the Confederacy believed about civilized behavior. "She teaches them to think like predators," Ben reported to the others during a private meeting. "Every tactical exercise is designed to exploit enemy weaknesses and maximize damage to opposing forces. It's simultaneously brilliant and terrifying." The resistance cell's first real test came when they intercepted a distress signal from a Confederate research station in the outer colonies. The facility was studying stellar phenomena and had a crew of 40 scientists and support staff. According to the signal, they were under attack by unknown forces. "This is it," Sam told the group as they prepared to depart. "The Devourers are moving from scouting to active harvesting. If we can save that research station, we might learn something useful about their current capabilities." Jake piloted a modified cargo ship toward the research station, while Sam checked weapons that she had cobbled together from mining equipment and industrial components. Confederate regulations prohibited the construction of military hardware. But desperate times called for creative interpretations of the law. The research station was still transmitting when they arrived, but the messages were wrong. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the facility director, was reporting that the attack had been successfully repelled and that assistance was no longer needed. Her voice was calm and professional, but Sam recognized the subtle changes that indicated Devourer conversion. "That's not her anymore," Sam warned the others. "The real Dr. Martinez is probably dead or absorbed. What's left is a Devourer agent using her knowledge and memories." The attack on the research station became the resistance movement's first victory, but it cost them half their numbers. Sam's improvised weapons were effective against Devourer technology, but the Confederate volunteers weren't prepared for the psychological impact of actual combat. 3 of them broke down completely when they realized they were killing thinking beings, even if those beings were no longer truly alive. "This is what war looks like," Sam told the survivors as they evacuated the facility. "It's not noble or glorious or clean. It's ugly and brutal, and it breaks people who weren't born to it. But it's the only way to stop an enemy that can't be reasoned with." Commander Alex Stone's pursuit ships arrived at the research station 6 hours too late. They found the facility's personnel unconscious, but alive, the attacking forces destroyed, and no sign of the escaped prisoner or her accomplices. The official report would describe the incident as a terrorist attack by violent extremists influenced by the humans' warmongering ideology. Back at their hidden base, the resistance movement was growing. Word of their successful rescue operation had spread through unofficial channels, attracting Confederate citizens who were beginning to doubt their government's ability to handle the crisis. Most of the new recruits were from the outer colonies, people who lived close enough to the affected areas to see the pattern that Confederate command refused to acknowledge. Sam found herself training people who had never conceived of violence as a solution to any problem. Teaching them to fight was like trying to explain color to someone who had been born blind. Some, like Lisa Cooper, showed natural aptitude for tactical thinking. Others struggled with concepts that required them to abandon everything they had been taught about civilized behavior. "The hardest part isn't learning how to use weapons," Sam explained during one of their evening discussions. "The hardest part is accepting that sometimes good people have to do terrible things to protect what they love." Dr. Ben Taylor had been analyzing data from their successful mission and was disturbed by what he found. The Devourer technology is advancing faster than expected. They're adapting to our defensive measures and improving their conversion techniques. At this rate, they'll be ready for a full invasion within months rather than years. The revelation that time was running outprompted Sam to take a desperate gamble. She began broadcasting coded messages on frequencies that only human reconnaissance teams would monitor, hoping to contact other survivors from Earth's deep space missions. The messages were simple: coordinates for a rendezvous point and a request for military assistance. "You're assuming that other humans are out there?" Vera pointed out during one of their planning sessions. "What if your reconnaissance group was the only one that survived?" "Then we're all going to die," Sam replied honestly. "This resistance movement is a good start, but 12 people with improvised weapons can't stop a galactic invasion. We need real soldiers, real weapons, and real military infrastructure if we're going to have any chance at all." The first response to Sam's broadcasts came 3 days later. A voice speaking English with a slight accent reported from a position deep in Confederate space. "Recon 7, this is Recon 3. We've been waiting 30 years for someone to wake us up. Request immediate tactical briefing and target assignments." Sam smiled for the first time since her rescue. The war for the Confederate galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was finally ready to fight back. The first sign that everything had changed came when the Outer Rim colonies stopped responding to Confederate communications. Not gradually, like equipment failures or natural disasters, but all at once across a front that stretched for thousands of light years. High Arbiter Nexus Prime stared at the galactic display in the Confederate Command Center and tried to understand what he was seeing. 17 star systems have gone dark in the past 48 hours, reported his intelligence. Chief Admiral Kate Morrison. No distress signals, no final transmissions, no indication of what happened to them. Nexus Prime had built his career on the assumption that galactic peace was a permanent achievement. War was something that primitive species did to each other before they learned to solve problems through diplomacy and trade. The idea that an entire civilization could simply vanish overnight challenged everything he believed about how the universe worked. "Send the fleet to investigate," he ordered. "Full battle formation." The words felt strange in his mouth. Confederate, Ships had battle formations, but they hadn't been used in 200 years except for ceremonial parades and training exercises. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy. Their tactics focused on containing conflicts rather than winning them. Sam Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the human reconnaissance ship Thunder and watched the Devourer main fleet emerge from dark space through the view screen. She had seen this before during Earth's final battle, but the scale here was beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Thousands of ships, each one larger than a Confederate battlecruiser, moving in perfect coordination toward the populated core of the galaxy. "How many?" asked Captain Tony Martinez, the leader of Reconnaissance Group 3. His team had been hiding in Confederate space for 30 years, posing as merchants and researchers while establishing hidden supply bases throughout the outer territories. "I count approximately 5,000 capital ships," Sam reported, "plus support vessels and converted craft from species they've already absorbed. This isn't just an invasion force, it's a civilization on the move." The Devourer fleet moved with a purpose that Confederate tacticians couldn't comprehend. Instead of heading directly for major population centers or strategic resources, they swept through space in a pattern designed to cut off escape routes and isolate defended systems. Each conquered world added to their numbers as local ships, and populations were converted to serve the collective consciousness. Commander Alex Stone led the Confederate Defense Fleet toward what intelligence believed was the main Devourer force. His ships were state-of-the-art by galactic standards, equipped with energy shields, faster-than-light drives, and weapon systems designed for precise, non-lethal enforcement actions. He was confident that superior technology and civilized tactics would carry the day. The first battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. Confederate ships opened communications channels, broadcasting offers of negotiation and peaceful resolution, even as Devourer vessels closed to weapons range. When the Devourers responded with conversion beams and energy drains, the Confederate crews discovered that their training in conflict resolution had not prepared them for enemies who wanted to absorb rather than defeat them. Alex watched in horror as his flagship's sister ship, the Harmony, was surrounded by smaller Devourer craft that attached themselves like parasites to its hull. Within minutes, the Confederate vessel's energy signature changed, and its weapons turned on their former allies. The crew was probably still alive inside, but they were no longer fighting for the Confederacy. "Retreat," Alex ordered, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. "All ships, withdraw to Rally Point Alpha." Of the 40 ships that had entered the battle, only 12 escaped. The rest had been destroyed or converted, their crews and technology now serving the enemy they had tried to stop. Alex's report to Confederate command was brief and devastating. Conventional tactics were useless against an opponent who could turn their own forces against them. Meanwhile, the human resistance movement was conducting hit-and-run attacks against Devourer supply lines using tactics that Confederate observers described as barbaric. Sam and her allies would strike isolated enemy positions, destroy everything they couldn't capture, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. They showed no interest in taking prisoners or preserving enemy equipment for study. "This is not warfare as civilized species understand it," complained High Arbiter Nexus Prime during an emergency council session. "These humans fight like animals, destroying rather than conquering, killing rather than converting enemies to their cause." Dr. Ben Taylor had been studying human combat methods since joining the Resistance and was beginning to understand why they were effective against Devourer technology. "The key is unpredictability," he reported to the Confederate Council. "Devourer tactical systems are designed to counter logical, efficient strategies. Human warfare appears chaotic and wasteful, but that chaos makes it impossible for the enemy to predict and counter their moves." The turning point came when Sam's reconnaissance teams discovered a Devourer command node hidden in the ruins of a conquered Confederate research facility. The installation was heavily defended and contained the collective intelligence that coordinated Devourer operations across 3 star systems. Destroying it would be suicide for any conventional attack force. But Sam had learned that sometimes suicide missions were the only way to achieve strategic objectives. "I need 20 volunteers," Sam announced to the assembled resistance fighters. "This is a one-way trip. We go in, we blow the command node, and we probably don't come back." Every person in the room raised their hand. After months of watching the Devourers consume everything they cared about, the prospect of striking a meaningful blow against the enemy was worth any personal cost. Sam selected her team based on technical skills rather than bravery, because courage was the one resource they had in abundance. The attack on the command node succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. Not only did they destroy the installation, but they captured intact Devourer communication equipment and tactical databases that revealed the enemy's overall strategic plan. The intelligence windfall was worth the loss of 15 brave volunteers, who died making it possible. Back at Confederate Command, Admiral Kate Morrison studied the captured intelligence with growing despair. The Devourer invasion plan was devastatingly simple. Consume outer colonies first to build strength, then move systematically toward the galactic core, absorbing everything in their path. There would be no negotiations, no terms of surrender, no hope of coexistence. "How long do we have?" asked Nexus Prime. "Based on their current rate of advance, they'll reach the core worlds within 6 months," Kate replied. "Unless something changes dramatically, the Confederacy will cease to exist by year's end." The something that changed was humanity. Sam's broadcast codes had awakened sleeper cells throughout Confederate space, revealing that Earth's reconnaissance missions had been far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Human operatives emerged from decades of deep cover, bringing with them weapons caches, intelligence networks, and most importantly, the knowledge of how to fight an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. Captain Jake Morrison found himself commanding a mixed force of Confederate volunteers and human special operations teams, attacking Devourer positions with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that confused enemy tactical computers. His crews included former mining engineers who had learned to build explosives from industrial equipment and Confederate security officers who discovered they had a talent for asymmetric warfare. "This isn't the galaxy I grew up in," Jake told Sam as they planned their next operation. 6 months ago, the biggest threat I faced was a broken drill bit. Now I'm commanding suicide missions against an enemy that wants to consume my entire species." "Welcome to the war," Sam replied. "The question is, are you going to win it?" The battle for the Confederate galaxy had only just begun, but already the peaceful civilization that had existed for 2 centuries was transforming into something harder and more dangerous. The Devourers had expected to find another easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened something that most of the galaxy thought was extinct: the human capacity for total warfare. The emergency session of the Confederate Council convened as Devourer forces reached the Middle Rim colonies and began their systematic consumption of the galaxy's most populous worlds. High Arbiter Nexus Prime looked around the chamber at representatives from dozens of species, all of them facing the same terrible reality. Their civilization was losing a war they had never wanted to fight. "The outer territories are gone," reported Admiral Kate Morrison. 43 star systems converted or destroyed in the past month. The enemy is adapting faster than our defensive strategies, learning from each engagement and improving their tactics. Sam Rodriguez stood before the council in the same military uniform she had been wearing when Jake Morrison found her 30 years earlier. It still bore the patches and insignia of a war that most of the galaxy refused to believe had ever happened. Now those symbols represented the only hope they had left. "You're still thinking like diplomats," Sam told the assembled representatives. "You're trying to win a war using the same mindset that kept you at peace for 2 centuries. It won't work. Nexus. Prime leaned forward in his chair. Then what do you propose, Lieutenant Rodriguez? Our fleets are scattered, our colonies are falling, and your human resistance cells, while effective, lack the numbers to mount a successful counteroffensive. Sam activated a holographic display that showed the galactic map with dozens of previously unknown installations marked in red. These are human military bases established by Earth's deep space reconnaissance missions. They've been hidden and inactive for 30 years, waiting for the activation codes that only I possess. The revelation sent a shock through the council chamber. The idea that humans had been secretly present throughout Confederate space, building military installations and stockpiling weapons, challenged every assumption about galactic security and sovereignty. You've been violating Confederate law for 3 decades, accused Council member Zara Thompson from the Centauri delegation. Building unauthorized military installations, stockpiling weapons of war, operating without permits or oversight. We've been preparing to save your lives, Sam replied bluntly. While you were debating diplomatic solutions to problems that don't exist, we were getting ready for the war that was always coming. Dr. Ben Taylor stepped forward with data tablets containing his analysis of human military technology. I've studied the equipment and tactics that Lieutenant Rodriguez has introduced to our resistance cells. The weapons are crude by Confederate standards, designed for reliability rather than precision, built to cause maximum damage rather than minimum casualties. But they work against devourer technology in ways that our advanced systems cannot. The council chamber erupted in arguments as representatives debated the moral implications of using human military methods. Some species had been pacifist for so long that the concept of intentionally killing enemies was literally incomprehensible to them. Others were beginning to understand that survival might require abandoning principles they had held sacred for generations. Captain Jake Morrison's voice cut through the debate from the communication system. He was broadcasting from the front lines, where mixed human Confederate forces were making their desperate stand against the advancing Devourer fleet. "This is Aurora Base calling Confederate command," Jake reported. "We've just completed the liberation of Research Station Echo using human tactical doctrine. Enemy forces destroyed, facility secured, 47 scientists and support staff rescued, but we lost 8 good people making it happen. And I need to know if their sacrifice was worth anything." The silence in the council chamber was deafening. These representatives had spent their entire careers avoiding situations where anyone had to die for political objectives. The idea that people were volunteering to give their lives for the greater good was both inspiring and terrifying. Sam made her decision. Activation code Omega 77 Alpha. Authorization Rodriguez Sam. Lieutenant, Earth Defense Force, Deep Space Reconnaissance. All units, all locations, full mobilization protocols are now in effect. Across the galaxy, hidden installations that had been dormant for 30 years suddenly came alive. Human soldiers emerged from stasis pods, weapon systems powered up, and spacecraft that had been disguised as asteroids or abandoned hulks revealed their true nature. The Confederate monitoring networks registered massive energy signatures appearing simultaneously in dozens of star systems. The transformation was immediate and shocking. Captain Tony Martinez led a human strike force against a Devourer command center using weapons that Confederate scientists couldn't identify and tactics that military analysts described as insanely aggressive. Within hours, they had accomplished what Confederate fleets had failed to do in months of conventional warfare. "The human approach to warfare is completely different from anything we've encountered," reported Dr. Ben Taylor as he studied combat footage from the liberated territories. "They don't fight to control territory or capture resources. They fight to destroy the enemy's ability to continue fighting. It's brutally efficient and absolutely terrifying." But the real surprise came when human forces began integrating Confederate volunteers into their operations. People like Lisa Cooper, who had learned human tactical methods during the early resistance movement, proved capable of bridging the gap between Confederate technology and human strategy. "We're not trying to make you into humans," Sam explained to a group of Confederate military officers who had volunteered for combat training. "We're trying to teach you how to think like predators instead of prey. Your technology is better than ours. Your ships are faster and more comfortable. Your weapons are more precise. But you've forgotten how to use any of it to actually hurt your enemies." The Battle of New Geneva became the turning point of the war. Sam led a combined force of human commandos and Confederate volunteers against the primary Devourer staging area, using a strategy that combined human unpredictability with Confederate technical superiority. The engagement lasted 14 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the enemy fleet and the liberation of 17 converted Confederate vessels. More importantly, the victory demonstrated that humans and Confederates could fight together effectively. The peaceful species' natural intelligence and advanced technology, when combined with human tactical thinking and willingness to accept casualties, created a military force that the Devourers couldn't predict or counter. High Arbiter Nexus Prime stood before the Confederate Council 3 months after Sam's activation of the human military network. The war was far from over, but for the first time since the Devourer invasion began, they were winning battles instead of just losing them more slowly. "The integration of human military doctrine into Confederate defense forces has fundamentally changed the nature of this conflict," he reported. "Our casualty rates have increased, but so has our effectiveness against enemy forces. We are becoming something we swore we would never be again, a warrior civilization." Sam listened to the political debate from the bridge of the newly commissioned UCS Defiant, a hybrid vessel that combined Confederate technology with human design principles. Through the view screen, she could see the lights of New Geneva, a Confederate colony that existed because people had been willing to die protecting it. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" asked Jake Morrison, who now held the rank of admiral in the newly formed Confederate Defense Force. "Teaching peaceful people how to make war? Turning diplomats into soldiers?" Sam considered the question, while watching a squadron of mixed human Confederate fighters practice attack formations that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. "I think we're doing the necessary thing," she replied. "Peace is only possible when you're strong enough to defend it. Your people learned that the hard way." The war against the Devourers continued, but it was no longer a hopeless struggle for survival. Human military expertise had awakened something in the Confederate species that had been sleeping for 2 centuries. The understanding that some things are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the only way to preserve what you love is to be willing to destroy those who would take it from you. In the end, the galaxy was at war, but for the first time in 30 years, Sam Rodriguez believed they might actually win.